All right, so my name is Elizabeth Richards, but I am not standing here as the Georgia chapter president. I am standing here as the moderator of this fantastic panel. My day job is I am the CEO of LongTerm Healthcare Solutions. So I am going to have a conversation today with these esteemed panel members about remote workforce. I know from our perspective, we still have probably 75% of our staff is still remote, and we have no intentions to bring them back. We have started having some people come in on a more regular basis because of productivity issues, which I'm sure we'll get into with this panel. But I am currently running my company with 75% of my workforce remote. I'm also a lawyer, so I have a lot of thoughts on the compliance issues around the remote workforce, so that is why we're here. So I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves, and then again, just give a little bit of information about your current status as it relates to remote workers.
Sure. I'm Derek Dudley. I'm the AVP of Revenue Cycle Operations at Wellstar. I've been there for 9 months. We are largely, almost extensively, completely remote. We have some billing operations such as correspondence and cash posting that are on site, but otherwise we are remote.
Good morning. My name is Kimberly Scatia. I am the Vice President of Revenue Cycle at Mercy Health in southern Wisconsin and northern Illinois. I have been there for 19 months, started right in the beginning of COVID. We are probably about 50% of our revenue cycle in the remote workforce. It is completely hybrid. We do not allow 100% remote work unless it is a hospital coder. And happy to be here. In case you're wondering why I'm here, I do have a farm in Georgia, so that's how I ended up here in Georgia. So I'm all over the place.
Hi, good morning. I'm Andrea Mejia. I'm with Piedmont Healthcare. I'm the Executive Director for Patient Financial Care, which means I serve the patient access operations for the health system and also the Customer Solutions Center for physician and hospital. We are definitely 100% remote, very similar to what Wellstar has shared. And I think also what's unique is we are now starting to hire out of state. So it's just not remote within the state of Georgia now, we're starting to look nationally.
So one of the things, when you talk about remote workforce and you read about the remote workforce, there's been some articles in the Wall Street Journal about the generational issues around this. Some older generational leaders don't know how to adapt to leading people remotely. So like in banking and finance and actually law, they're bringing those sectors are seemingly to bring more people in. And I read a really interesting thing about, is that because the leaders themselves cannot adapt to how you lead remotely? Because as everyone in this room knows, leading a team that's, down the hall from you or in your meeting room and leading a team that could potentially be all over the country is not easy. And from my perspective, before COVID, I ran a national team. I ran eligibility for a national company, and so I had a team all over the country. So I was a little bit more prepared for what that looks like. But I was just wondering y'all's thoughts on, how has your leadership had to change in the last, year, 18 months in order to effectively lead your teams remotely?
You want to start?
Sure. That's a great question, Elizabeth. It really is. I was similar to you. I had come from a background prior to joining Piedmont where I had worked a blend, right? So I had traveled, I was remote. I think what is so unique now is we're 100% remote. So you think about communications, body language is 55% of communications, and that's just gone, right? And so I think the uniqueness of how to challenge yourself how to communicate now has driven more into being aware of what I'm putting in writing and also balancing all the mechanisms that I'm using to communicate. Because in the past, we did get the cooler type conversations, right? Well, those are transitioned now into chats, and it's, emails. And within a given day now, I'm learning to balance email, chat, my chat on my phone. I mean, it's just all these different layers of communication. And trying to make sure we're all going the same direction is something that is such a big challenge right now. And so definitely communications, over-communicating now is a key element to doing that. And so there's days that, at the end of the day, you're just worn out because you've been online, you've been chatting. And for me, I'm working off of 2 computers typically just to keep up with what's going on right now. So I think having to learn as a leader is to not only as a leader being clear about my communications, but also balancing the stress I think that comes along with that.
It's really interesting because somewhat like you, I had a great background to sort of prepare me for this. I was in consulting. So I was all over the country all the time. I was on email, I was on phone, I was on chat, and so preparing myself for this, I think I went into it a little better. Now, where the challenge has been and where my leadership has had to change is being able to teach others. We were actually talking earlier this morning about the fact that, teaching people who've never worked remotely how to do that and how to separate work from home. I have staff that after the first 8 months of COVID, when we did send everybody home with desktops, no less, that came to me and said, please don't ever send me home again. I can't work from home. This doesn't work for me. I can't do this. And so we've done a lot of work to create the hybrid environment so that, number one, we make sure they come into the office for a reason. But number 2, those people that are working from home that have those options, we're leading them and teaching them how to do that. No, you can't work through your lunch. No, I don't want you to constantly be on email unless you're in leadership. Yes, I want you to be on camera, and here's why, because of what you just said, right? If I can't see you, I miss your head nod or your eye roll or, and I want you to disagree with me. I tell my people that all the time. Disagree with me. Tell me why I'm wrong. Give me a reason. But if I can't see you, I don't know what you're doing. I can't tell that you're really not listening to me because you're over here doing this, right? And so it's more about teaching people how to balance and teaching the leaders how to lead remote teams in where we are in our journey, because we're still, I think, a little newer than where you guys are.
I think those are really great points. One thing I noticed is I have to be more intentional about my emotional support for the staff. Right? We can all talk about performance, but I really have to make sure that I'm focused on paying attention to how are they doing emotionally, right? I can see their workspace if I make them turn on their cameras because they hate it, but how are they doing emotionally? So take 5 minutes before the start of your meeting, before you dive into the meat of your meetings, to have that kind of water cooler chat. What are you guys doing this weekend? Big plan? It's casual, it's conversational, because you can't do it anymore. You can't stop by somebody's desk and go, "Did you guys have a good weekend? What have you been up to?" Those are meaningful conversations. They don't seem it at the time, but we're all feeling it and seeing it in our remote workforce, that lack of connectivity, and that's something I have to be really mindful of.
Well, and that kind of goes into, what I was going to ask about next is, in the podcast that I'm still promoting over here, in that first episode, they talk about the mental issues of COVID and how we really haven't spent enough time kind of diving into that. Our teams, each team meets daily for a 30-minute touch base on Zoom. The first 10 minutes, though, is reserved for conversation, like letting them converse about amongst themselves, ask how their weekend was, how their son's baseball game, whatever. We've intentionally told them we're going to touch base every day, but the first 10 minutes is y'all's social hour. And sometimes my leadership team, we don't even get on the teams just to let them feel comfortable to have that connection without, their bosses on the phone with them. And then the other thing that I've done that I really love is my management team and I have a 4:30 touch base every day, but Fridays. They made me cancel the Friday one.
4:30 on a Friday.
Yeah, just to kind of go over what happened on the day, but we started playing this game, Tell Me Something Good. So every single day, and believe me, they grumbled and they still grumble. But, we've kind of gotten into a rhythm with it now, and it's a lot of fun. And now people are like, and it's just to kind of change that narrative to there's a lot going on in the world right now. The world is really heavy. So and when you start doing it, you think it's easy. But then when every single day you have to say something good, it becomes a little bit more difficult. And the point is to look for the good in everything. So that's something that we've done. That's been a lot of fun, easy, doesn't cost a lot of money, but just kind of going with that. But on the physical and the mental well-being, we have this workforce, which is dealing with all of the stress of everything, not just their job, but kids and being sick and people being sick and fear. And then, there's been some conversations recently about the physical well-being. When you don't leave your house to go to work, when you don't get out of a chair, when you go from the bedroom to the kitchen to wherever you're working, which for a lot of people is the kitchen, you're getting, 500 steps a day, you're sitting in the kitchen, so you're eating all day, there's been a lot of talk about that. So I was wondering if you guys were seeing anything at your facility where you're wanting to specifically reach out to employees to, encourage their physical health or encourage mental breaks or anything like that, just to try to, because we are only as good as our staff is healthy, and that's really what it is at the end of the day.
One of the things that I read somewhere that the 20% of the staff that work from home say loneliness is the biggest problem they have with being a remote worker. I mean, so my wife's worked from home for the last 15 years. Her company, when she started, said, pick one of these pieces of fitness equipment. That's what they do. So it's Wellstar's not doing that. But we're very mindful of the need to encourage folks. We've installed some apps for employee wellness, and we're taking steps to do the right things. But we encourage our staff to go out and walk and get out. It's important for them to take care of themselves. And it's a great point. You're getting 500 steps a day when you stay in your house. When you went to the office and walked in from the parking lot and you couldn't help but get 2,000 or 3,000 just by accident, right? So you didn't have to be intentional about it. Now you have to encourage your staff to be intentional about that. So it's a big change.
Yeah, and it can't be, you can't say, oh, well, it's, employee health's responsibility or anything like that. So like for us, this is where my size is probably a little bit better than what you guys are going through. I have 4 business offices in 4 different locations, right? And they're anywhere from 30 to an hour apart. And even before COVID, we would do things like have the Steps Challenge. We would coordinate events. There's some beautiful lakes and ponds and things like that we would coordinate events to have people come to and, see each other outside of work, do some things. But again, it also goes back to the policies that you have for your work from home. If you are not in leadership, you cannot work through lunch.
Work-life balance.
You have to take the breaks. You shouldn't be logging on at all hours of the day and night. And it kind of goes back to that mental and physical well-being of teaching people how to do this. It is not easy. We do a lot to teach people how to do their job, but we don't do much to teach them on how to have mental health and how to be happy at work. We're actually, so I'm sure most of you know next week is PAM week. So it's National Patient Account Management Week. So we're doing a huge event. I mean, it's massive. We've got 900 people that are involved in this event. We're giving all kinds of stuff away. We talk with all of our vendors. We got free stuff. And we're even launching a blog this Friday so that we can have some of this fun stuff, right? Talk about health and well-being and talk about, whose kids are graduating and who's got new dogs and those types of things to keep that mental connection, employee engagement, and happiness at work.
Yeah, I would say that at Piedmont we're very similar to Wellstar. I think just COVID became such a dominant factor for us as an organization that these elements really came to the sideline. And we actually as a leadership team just had that conversation this week about building that strategy and that plan of really how do we do this. HR, had done some things through the year, but actually building that program for the remote employee is something we've got to invest in because, I read an article, I think it was on Inc., and said that, 4 out of 10 people are looking to change a job now post-COVID. And part of that is engagement, why they're leaving the organization where they're at. And so I think we as businesses have to invest in this for people. And I will tell you personally what I did to try to create a barrier for that is prior to COVID, I had a in-office home, a home office, right? I built a she shed. I literally have to walk outside my home and go down a path and go outside. My husband was awesome. He put air conditioning in. He really decked it out for me. But that is where I go every day. And so for me personally, it just creates that separation. And I can separate that and then go to my personal life. And so I realize not all of our employees are going to be able to do that type of scenario, but trying to encourage how they can create those uniquenesses, I think is important.
So I know you guys are going to be shocked, but my remote worker agreement is 4 pages long. And we've amended it so many times this year, but it includes things like you are required to take your breaks, you are required to take your lunch. We actually went back to amend it. We had to put internet speed in there. I think we talked about this yesterday with dial-up and things like that, but we had people buying, the cheapest internet speed and trying to run, Epic, and they're like, it's crashing every 5 minutes, and they're blowing. My poor IT department will almost quit over this. That like these, same people every day because they didn't have enough internet speed. So kind of like we do have an office, so I guess we are kind of running in hybrid. And our whole thing is you can stay at home as long as you're meeting your productivity and you have internet speed. But one of the things that we also did is we actually had kind of a coaching session about creating your in-home office space. So the she shed sounds amazing. I might need one of those. But there's a lot of our employees. They're living in single, double bedroom apartments with lots of people, and they really don't have that environment. So we kind of talked about on a call one day the importance of creating that space that is your space for work, if that's just like a little corner in your bedroom or wherever it is. And then we actually made them send us pictures. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we said we want a picture, and that goes back to the other part of this panel is risk management. That goes back to a lot of the kind of risk management situations around this, is having a picture on file of where these people are working, what the environment looks like, what the security type things looks like. So we require them to send a picture. Have you guys done anything around opportunities for like non-risk social interaction? So have you had any sort of socials, barbecues, parking lot parties, drive-throughs, things like that?
So I haven't been at Wellstar a long time, 9 months, but we had this fantastic event organized, right, where we were going to have all the employees come back to the parking lot. We'd be socially, sort of quasi-socially distant, and we would have like a carnival environment and just kind of celebrate. We had a really strong end of our fiscal year, so we wanted to say thank you for all of their hard work. And then the Delta variant kicked up and we had to cancel that. But I think it's important to not let go of chasing after those social opportunities. Being mindful of the current situation. Like I have a team and we're going to meet, I just got the confirmation that they had arranged an escape room. So it's a small number of people. I have 7 direct reports. We're going to meet and do an escape room together. So I have staff that I actually haven't met them face to face in the 9 months I've been there. Now they work on the Alabama border, so it's a long ways from Atlanta. But shame on me, and I think that's important for us to make sure to do that. Looking someone in the face is different than looking at somebody on Zoom. You get feedback just from being in their proximity. So I think it's great, and it will also help bind them to me and me to them. So we become more cohesive as a team. So I think those are great.
Yeah, I agree. So we have had a couple of small events. There's been a couple of community events that have happened where our teams have created teams in the events. So we've done a lot of that type of stuff. I mentioned that I'm actually in Illinois and Wisconsin. I have a farm in Georgia. My home is in Florida, so I'm everywhere.
She's got the East Coast locked down.
Locked down. I got it. So again, it's one of those things like you were saying, the FaceTime. I have killed myself the last year between traveling from Florida to Wisconsin to Illinois to Georgia, back to Wisconsin, back to Illinois, but literally going to all 6 offices and meeting all of my staff and being face-to-face and having one-on-one conversations, and it goes a long way. And so we've had different teams that have created smaller events. We haven't had like a full-blown everybody kind of thing. That's what this week is going to be, which is tricky because, again, like I've had those people that don't ever want to go home. We have those people that never want to come back. They never want to come back. They never want to see your face. They never want to step foot in the office. And so it's hard to convince them to come in. And you don't want to use the word mandatory, right? That's always an ugly word. So it's a dance.
One thing I heard too, and you guys, 80% of the workforce doesn't want to come back.
Yeah.
But we're still having conversations institutionally, and I'm sure you guys are as well, is when they come back, what it's going to look like. This is temporary. It's not temporary. We cannot put this genie back in the bottle.
Yeah.
I agree with that. At Piedmont, we actually reduce our footprint for revenue cycle in our corporate offices. Mm-hmm. So there is no space to bring them back to.
Yeah.
Right.
This is our model.
Yeah.
And so the investment in that to do these employee engagement things like we're talking about is going to have to be unique. We have not met in person. Piedmont has been very intentional about ensuring that we are not meeting in large groups. In fact, we were reminded this past week until the COVID rate is below 5% according to the CDC. And I think we're at 8 in Metro Atlanta right now.
Yeah.
We're still en masse when we meet. So, I think until that relieves as an organization, we're not going to see a widespread effort to do that. I'm very fortunate that during COVID, I have not had to hire a direct report. I had my leaders prior to COVID. I'm so thankful for that because I had those rapports and the relationships. And that is an extreme investment that I don't know what I would have done without that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've had the same problem. I can't tell you the number of times we've planned something and then canceled it because either the Delta or, somehow we have 3 people that are positive for COVID and we don't want to risk it. And so that's definitely, and I think that can be frustrating for the staff too, because they do get excited. Some of them do get really excited about it, and to have to pull the plug at the last minute is not a lot of fun. Let's shift for a little bit and talk about, equipment and compliance with that equipment. That's the big part about the risk management, and I think why the healthcare industry in particular fought remote work extra hard for a long time is HIPAA. We can't have people with access to, all of our systems and every document we have at their house and have no way of knowing if their workstation is locked and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, we had to get over that. And I do suspect, though, that in the coming years, we will see quite a bit of guidance from HHS around some pretty big HIPAA issues that did occur because of, remote work. I'm sure your IT departments like mine have tried to do everything possible to lock computers down, but there's only so much that you can do. So kind of a 2-part question. Number 1, what equipment do you provide? I mean, we heard that Wellstar provides treadmills. Just kidding. But I mean, I've heard everything from, everyone owns a computer, so we didn't even send a computer home. I've heard laptops. I've heard desktops. I've heard people purchasing chairs, going back to, work life, safety and personal health. I've heard there are companies now shipping chairs to their employees because if you think about it, there's a lot to be said about sitting in a good chair all day as opposed to sitting in your wooden chair at your kitchen table. So just wondering from your perspective, what sort of, office supplies are another thing. Are you shipping them Post-it notes and pens and, things like that? We got some pushback. I have some, lower level clerical staff don't make a lot of money, and they didn't have budget to go buy highlighters or, I'm shipping Post-it notes out to make them happy mostly, but just wondering from your perspective what you're doing and and then anything that you're doing to try to keep that equipment safe.
So we're smaller, so I'm going to jump in here and take this one first. And we're still pretty new. So at Mercy, Revenue Cycle is the only remote team. Let that sink in for a second. So my IT, my HR, anybody, all of the administrative overhead, they're not allowed to work remotely. And that's part of metrics, right? And our CEO is just like, nope, if I can't measure it, they can't go home. That's leadership. It's a whole different discussion. So when we first went down this path, it was furlough, right? We furloughed, and then we went, oh my God, volumes are coming back up. We got to get people back to work. People didn't want to come in. We couldn't bring them in. So we sent desktops home. Oh my God. We sent all these desktops home. We didn't even have VPN for those people. They were RDPing into a machine at the office.
Oh, wow.
Oh my God, what a mess. So I had to fight really hard, get the VPN set up. Well, then we had all kinds of problems because they couldn't get to this app and that app, and so we've worked through all of that. However, now going from we were in crisis mode to long-term mode, now we have to deal with what are we supplying? And we are not supplying Wi-Fi. We're not reimbursing for Wi-Fi, and we're not paying for phones, mostly because we can do voice over IP. So we're setting everybody up with the VoIP system. We did have some pushback about that, but we kept telling them these things are coming, and this is a optional program. If you don't want to work from home, then you can come to the office. That was our stance. We've worked through a lot of those things, but now we are starting to have those conversations about, well, how do I ensure that someone has a comfortable chair? I can tell you, again, I'm in Georgia at least once a month, and I sit in a wooden chair at my kitchen table because I have a tiny home on my property, and that's all I have at the moment. And that is the most uncomfortable position to sit for 8 hours a day. And so, we're starting to have those conversations about what do we provide to those staff members. And as we're starting to go through some additional changes and nuances at the organization, we are now preparing for full hybrid, right? Instead of having desktops, we're setting everybody up as a laptop with a docking station in the office and at home. The chairs are still up in the air. We're not going to pay for Wi-Fi. It's not going to happen. But it's nice because we have some really great success stories. And so we're trying to convince the CEO that other parts of the organization can do this, right? This needs to happen. Can't put the genie back in the bottle. We have to be prepared because these guys are going to steal my staff.
Yes, we are.
And and I have to be ready for that. We all do.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Not sorry.
Right, not sorry.
Yeah, not sorry. Well, it's interesting. Pre-COVID, pretty much leaders and key analyst type roles got laptops.
Yep.
Right? So we kind of had that alive in the environment. But that wasn't a solution then for the staff. So, at COVID, it was all rush, right? 2 weeks, we're home. People went home on their personal equipment. Some had to buy equipment to be able to do it. We didn't open up really an option to keep coming in office except for just a minor few. So we're remote. So we provide equipment. We're not 100% throughout revenue cycle. My teams are, thank goodness. We have been for a while now. It's stable. But we did the box home, so they then do a virtual desktop connection back to our network. And so, there were some learning curves with that and probably some pains. And so we really had to work closely with IT to be able to get stable with that and work through that. And so that's our model now. I think the challenge we still have is as we hire new hires, what's the right time to equip them with our equipment? Is it day 1 or is it day 30 or what is it?
Well, because that becomes a thing, because if they don't work
Absolutely.
out, then you've got to get your equipment back.
Right. And so,
Which we've had plenty of adventures with that.
yeah, and so that's kind of the balance that we're at right now. Right now, we're going with the window to make sure you're a fit, right? So that means we've got to hire you with an understanding this is what you need in order to work this job. It's not an alternative for us, for these folks to come in the office. You're remote.
We did a lot of the smash and grab when we first sent everybody home too, right? They took whatever they had on their desktop and took it home and tried to set it up, and they VPN'd in, and we have two-factor authentication and all of that. So, but I think longer term, as we look to be a remote workforce and not just crisis management working remote, and I think we all did that, right? Everybody sent everybody home in a rush, figure it out as we go. Longer term, though, now we need to start to figure out what that office in a box look like. Do we give everybody a laptop and a docking station and 2 monitors? And you should, right? Because that's what you're doing at the office. You've got 2 monitors that match in size because it was more effective. We're sending them home with 1 monitor because that's what we had. So give everybody an effective work environment. Give them all the chances to succeed that you would give them in the office. Set them up for success. I think it's a great point to have them show a picture of their work environment also. But I think all of us have to design what that remote worker environment looks like and standardize it. So, I love the thought at Piedmont where we want to hold off on trial to make sure that they're going to be okay. But I worry we have a challenge hiring bodies, getting bodies. HRs, they're fantastic folks, but they're struggling. And I'm sure I see a lot of heads nodding in here. I'm sure we are all dealing with that. We're competing with retail for workers, right? Our hourly workers can go anywhere and make about the same wage. So I got to find a way to not be an encumbrance to them jumping into my workforce. So I don't know. I hope you guys are successful. That would be fantastic. But I worry that, they're just, I don't want to go buy a new computer and a computer chair and build out my office so I can work for $16 an hour.
Yeah, and that's not a steadfast for us yet.
Yeah.
We're trying to work through that. I want to mention about the chairs, though. What we did, because we transformed the space, we allowed people to come get their chairs.
Yeah.
So they took the home. So that took care of that mass workforce in the beginning. Whatever's on your desk, as long as it didn't have patient information on it, take it home, right?
Yeah.
And so we allowed that. I think now, though, as we have brought in new hires, that's really probably part of the box we need to make a decision on. And I don't think the ergonomic factor has kicked in yet.
No.
Again, those folks who manage that within our organizations, they haven't been there to do that during COVID, right?
they're-
They've had other
They're doing
direction.
everything else.
That's right. They're
still
doing
trying to
everything
figure
else,
out
and
how
so
to do that remotely
Yeah.
too, right? I mean, what a shift for them to go to one office and handle 800 people, or go to 800 offices and handle one
One
person.
person.
Yep.
I mean,
Oh, yeah, and our teams have told us, we're not doing that.
Yeah.
They flat out said, we are not doing that. I'm like, oh, fabulous, okay.
Yeah, we had the sit-stand,
Yes.
desks. To my knowledge, we didn't deploy any of those home.
I wonder too, though, if we couldn't develop a video or training. So instead of going to 800 offices,
That's
you
what
have
I said.
one training video on how to set your desk up ergonomically correct, right?
Yep.
Make sure that your monitors are at eye level instead of down low or up high, so you don't have neck issues. Make sure your chair is adjusted.
No, I mean, I
Just-
think that's
It's a
huge.
great idea.
It's
Yeah.
going to have to happen.
That has to happen because you can't go to 800 individuals' houses. But you could generate one really solid educational video that could scratch that itch.
Absolutely.
I think the point that you guys made about kind of the box, and it's almost going to have to become standardized across the industry, because to your point, if Piedmont's box includes a chair and Wellstar's box doesn't have a chair,
Well, we'll hear
and
about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, and both organizations are hiring. I mean, it seems silly to say that out loud, but I read something that said, people are no longer asking, do you offer remote work? Because they're assuming
They're expecting
you
it.
offer remote work. They want to know what you're offering with your remote work package to make them successful. So, we can laugh about chairs and
That's the
post-it notes
treadmill
and
thing.
desks. Yeah, the treadmill thing.
I
It's
mean,
the treadmill
My
thing.
wife's company, that's a recruitment
Yeah.
tool.
Yeah.
That you get a piece of, I mean, it was a $2,500 piece of fitness equipment that they gave to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's no longer, like you said this morning at breakfast, it's no longer that we get to choose our employees.
They
Our
choose us.
employees are choosing us.
Right.
They're looking at you and going, well, why should I choose you? I mean, that's exactly what's going on.
That's what we have to do is we always made the employees come to us and they met at our facility.
Mm-hmm.
We have to meet them where they want to be, right? So if they want to work remotely from home and be engaged in that, that's what we have to do as employers. We have to be the most attractive employer that we can be.
Well, and to, Andrea's point, we're no longer looking at just a Georgia workforce.
Nope.
You're looking at people that have talent and building experience and all these things from, looking at what hospitals are offering all across the country.
That's
So
right.
it's a really interesting, we also took a position where we're not paying for Wi-Fi, but we're getting some pushback now that, well, I have this other job offer and they're going to pay for my internet. So, like those little things are going to have to be worked out. And to your point, when we've shifted from chaos to, okay, now this is permanent.
This is the new normal.
It's permanent.
Yeah.
This is normal. And
One of the things yesterday,
no, go ahead.
One of the things yesterday they talked about, some of the rural healthcare environments had depressed wages, and that's unfortunate. But those folks now can come and work in Atlanta or Houston or California because they're remote. So so they have the ability now to move outside of that county that has suppressed wages. They may have a lower cost of living there also, so it may become more attractive for them to work remotely for a company in the city that's paying more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the big conversation
Yeah.
now, right? Because you see all these articles out there where people are complaining about, it shouldn't matter where I work. You pay me what you pay everybody else, right? And that's
Yeah.
that is the big discussion going on now, because that's not reality of how HR works.
Do I
mean,
pay
it just
somebody
doesn't.
more in Atlanta for being a billing specialist than I do in Buford for doing the same job?
Yeah, and today we do.
I
I
know,
mean,
but-
today we do, and so it's got to change.
But they're going to make us change that.
Mhm. Yeah,
We don't have a
absolutely
choice.
have to change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I think from the risk management, compliance, legal side, if you do not have some sort of very extensive work from home document that people are signing that is going over all of these things, even the ergonomic, or I cannot say that word,
Ergonomic.
that, because you got to think about it. We're going to start seeing workers' comp claims. You made me, you knew I was working at my kitchen table because I sent you a picture without an adequate chair, and now I have this back problem, or I have carpal tunnel, or I have something like that. So, you can try to get around a lot of that in an agreement. The equipment is another thing. We have ours has very specific rules about what you can and cannot do with our equipment. What we're expecting, we're expecting our equipment to be locked down. We're expecting nobody, because my IT guys, somebody's trying to get to Pokemon on one of our laptops because they were letting their kid, play their games on our laptops. Like, those are things that we never really thought about or had to deal with before. So just you can cover all of that in an agreement, get an employee to sign that also gives you, you know, the expectations laid out in writing. So that's your free legal advice for the day. If you don't have one of those, you need one. But just to finish this out, and then we'll open it up for questions. I wanted to know what you think best practices are for a high-functioning remote team. You know, what is the best practices around engaging productivity, employee coaching, making sure we still have a promotional structure, you know, in our environment? I know, again, to all of our conversation, this is still very, very new, but anything that you have found in kind of the best practices space that you can share?
Andrea?
I think it's new, is what I would tell you. I think that I think I'd rather address like what I'm concerned about, and you just mentioned, I think promotion. I think career development is a challenge, and I'm concerned for those folks that are in that next level up opportunities, right? Like all of us, a large number of us in this room, we were in person, we were mentored, we had lunches with folks, we got to go to other divisions within our organizations. That doesn't exist anymore. And so how do you develop your talent relative to that? And so I'd love to actually know if someone's figured that out, because I think that's something that's going to be part of the retention and whether people want to come and work with us or not. So we've got to invest in that.
They need a career.
They need a career, that's
and
right.
So this is where, and maybe I'm doing things a little bit backwards. That has been my primary focus in setting up this program, is ensuring that I have an educational path and a retention strategy. So gone are the days of I've got a biller who doesn't know what the career path is. We've laid out not only what we expect, because my poor follow-up director, everyone that's in follow-up is now moving up, because, you know, we've told them, if you are high performing and you're in the follow-up team, I want you on my denials management team. That's your next step. And so they know, and we got our CEO to approve HFMA corporate membership. If you get your CRCR, you automatically get a 5% bump. Like, we've done those things to say, what are we going to do to give you a path? And if you don't take that path, what does it look like just from a pure retention perspective from a pay scale? So I want to know that if I have a 20-year employee, is she making enough versus now my wage has gone up? And it wasn't. I mean, I had a 20-year employee that was making $1 more an hour than our starting minimum wage for the same job. And I went, oh no, this is a problem. So I kind of went about it a little bit backwards, because it took us a long time to convince a CEO that this was the right path. And he's still not convinced organizationally. He's only convinced for my team. It's not my problem. So we've looked at how do we have those educational opportunities? What is the path for moving up, and how do we retain people? And we did all of that before we started through this process, because I just felt like retention was way more important. Now, I still haven't figured out how am I going to recruit from Georgia, because I haven't figured out how I can do all my training online. But that's my next step.
Coming. Yeah.
It's coming. That's my next step.
So I think you have to communicate. You have to be hyper communicative, right? I mean, especially with the remote workforce. I touch base with my staff so much more than I ever have before, because I can't just see them or wave at them or, you know, hey, what's going on? You have to be clear and transparent and share as much data as you can. And secondly, if you're not a metrics-driven organization, if you don't have KPIs and dashboards, get them.
Get them.
Find a way to track what they're doing at home. Whatever system you're in, there's options, right? VISPA is the sponsor of this panel. We put that in Ohio, and it's a work tasking system that sat on top of my billing system, but it was able to tell me what my staff was doing, how many widgets they're producing per hour, per day, what's their most active time, all of those things you need to know.
And are they doing the right thing?
Yep.
Right? Because we did the same thing, right? We had to have those metrics. If you don't have the metrics, this whole thing is going to fall apart.
So be clear and transparent with your staff, and then manage by the numbers, because that's honest, right? Mm-hmm. And your staff wants to do a good job. I think nobody hires anybody who wants to come in and do a halfway job. They all start wanting to do great work. We just get in their way. Mm-hmm. For whatever reason, we don't allow them to succeed, or we don't equip them to succeed, or we fail in coaching them in how to succeed. Be that for them also. Communicate often.
Yep.
So that's really my 2 cents.
One other thing I want to mention that we did is we really restructured all of our project management for any initiatives or projects or items that we were doing organizationally. And at the very beginning, it began like a war room type concept, right? Like we were just heads down and working through things and had a list of, 500 show up all overnight. So we had to manage that. And so I think because we were also remote, we had to really invest in creating teams that could do that for us. So at any point now, we can go on to SharePoint and we can know what's outstanding. And it helps us then make decisions on priority of things better than we did in the past. And I think the crucial factor of that is without being present, this is the mechanism we have to have. So that ensures that communication. There's not an excuse for a leader to not know what's going on in their area. And for me as a leader to be able to go in and look in my teams and know what they're working on from the leadership perspective. So that was critical.
One of the things too is everybody in this room has always been in the know as far as metrics. You know the dashboard. Share them.
Share them.
Make your staff know the dashboards just like you do. There's no reason why they can't understand that, and it will help them perform to a higher level, right? Understand the why. It's great that we all know it and we can make business decisions based on it. They need to know it to understand why we're making the business decisions we do. So share it. Be transparent with it.
That's such great advice because, like you, right? I mean, being new to the organization, one of the requirements that the CEO has for us as vice presidents is you have to have what he calls a VP huddle every month. And I would go every month and I would share the metrics. Here's our AR days. Here's our AR greater than 90. And I'll never forget it. The second month I was there, I had a young girl come to me and say, "What's an AR day?"
Educate, yeah.
I was like,
Oh boy.
Oh, we've got a long
and
ways
it
to
dawned
go.
on me, and I was like, wow. I'm like, oh my gosh, it never occurred to me because no one had ever shared it. No one had ever talked to them about what it really meant.
Yeah, we started putting productivity numbers in our Teams chat every morning, and it was amazing how different the next day, after we started that, how it, how it increased when people, were seeing it out there that they were the bottom.
Yeah.
That goes, I don't know if anybody's done the gamifications, but we use gamifications, and that's another way to kind of engage the staff, remotely on the metrics. So it's been pointed out to me by an audience member that I missed the probably most glaring thing to talk about when it comes to working remotely, which is people with children.
Oh.
So
dogs.
or dogs, cats, dogs, birds. No, I am a mother of a 6 and a 9-year-old boy. I don't ever want to live the months of March and April 2020 again in my entire life. Remote schooling and 2 full-time, working people and being stuck in the house was a next level of awfulness. But I was lucky. My children went back to school last August. They go to a private school, so they went back last August, and we've been on a relatively normal school schedule since. So I have been lucky, outside of a few times where they get sent home for quarantine or things like that. But I think for us, we started out with the kind of chaos. We just need everybody home, do the best you can, and we all understand. But now understanding that this is more of a permanent environment, we have recently had to have some coaching sessions with particular staff members of, okay, you had childcare before COVID. You can't just, because you're home now, you can't just want to save money on childcare and have your children, but it's very difficult because we want to be flexible for when they get sent home from quarantine or if somebody's sick or things like that. So we want to offer that flexibility, but we also can't have people, just not getting childcare because they're home now and their children are constantly, running in and out and around and in Zoom calls and making noise in the background and they're not meeting their numbers. So didn't know if you guys have found that perfect balance yet, because we're still definitely working on it.
So first, I wanted to give props to St. Joseph Candler, right, for what they said yesterday, what they did. They leased a vacant school and started doing childcare and school for their employees. That's huge. That was a big step up, right? My approach is, I don't care when they work. If you have to be present for your child, be present for your child. Just get the job done. I expect you to work 8 hours. I don't care if it's from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. as long as you don't need to touch somebody in the real world, right? If you can do your job between 6 and 2, do it. I don't care. I want to be that employer where it works for them and it works for me. If your child is up and you want to be involved in your child's life or have to do homeschooling, do it during the day, that's fine. If you have to be present to call Blue Cross, then we have additional challenges, right? And for that piece, you may have to have daycare arrangements like you did before, because the world has not changed that much, right? So there's still pieces of our industry that have to interact with pieces that are working 8 to 5. So if you have to touch person, you know, but I will be as flexible as possible. I think that makes us more attractive as an employer, and me a better leader. You know, how do I meet them where they need to be?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I agree with you in some respects, but like you said, we have a lot of people that have to be there during normal business hours, so they can't. So if you're in one of those roles, the expectation on the forms you sign is that you have childcare if you have children. And the other thing that we learned very quickly when we sent everybody home is they have to sign a shift differential waiver. Because if you're on Kronos, you know, once you clock in, you get a shift differential. Yeah, no, we're not doing that. If you want to work from 4 in the morning till whenever, I'm not paying you because that's your choice.
They figured that out pretty quickly.
Oh, they figured that out really quickly, and it completely blew some budgets in the beginning. So we had to fix that. But from a child care perspective, for those people that do have children, it's very clearly stated in the policy, and we have specific forms for specific roles.
Yep.
So the follow-up team has specific forms that they have to sign because they do have to have some normal business hour stuff. My coding team, I don't care when they work. I don't care if they want to work in the middle of the night. I don't care.
Yeah.
Do whatever you need to do. But yeah, for those that have to touch a person, they are expected to have childcare.
Really, and the window's closing in our industry on, you know, calling the payer for a status. You can
Yeah.
status check it, you know, with a bot.
Yeah.
You don't need to call, and it's a waste of their time to do it.
It's a huge
You
waste
sit
of
on the
time.
phone for 15 minutes to find out it's still processing.
Yeah, but welcome to Illinois because
Yeah.
that's the only way you can get anything done.
So
Sorry.
Elizabeth, I think one other consideration, not only child care, but I actually think it's an asset as an employer to recognize that if you offer a remote employee the ability maybe to be a caregiver. So that's my scenario. I actually have an elderly parent in my home that needs just checking on every now and then. You know, prior to being remote, I didn't do that.
Yeah.
I couldn't do that. And so there's not 100%. It's not all day long. It's just a check-in. It's make lunch. And so that's something that as an employer, that if you can hire people now that have that need, and many of us do, right? That's something that we can all offer as an alternative
That's
if you
a
come to
great
work
point.
for us.
Well, that's
Good
a
point.
benefit for you as an employee, which makes
Absolutely.
you bonded to that employer, right? Hey, they let me do this. It works for everybody.
Works for everybody.
Yeah, and it's no cost.
So the dogs thing got mentioned. Has anyone found the answer to
We just laugh about it.
Fido
Like,
in the background of
literally.
everyone's Zoom call?
I think we all accept it now,
We
right?
accept it. It's normal. I mean, I was on a Zoom call with one of my managers the other day, and the cat was walking around her
Yeah.
neck, and I'm like, okay,
But-
this is life.
We're all people. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and we all previously we all put up this image of, you know, wear a suit and tie and whatever.
Yeah.
We're all normal people, and we got dogs and kids and interactions with our gardener. You know, you hear the lawnmower going outside on a Teams call, or, you know, you're on mute. You're still on mute. you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And like you said, my mom walks through the back screen. I'm like, okay, yeah, there's my mom. Like, you know, it is what it is.
But it's not unique to that one employee.
Right.
We all do it.
We
We
all
all
do.
have challenges, and reality is life happens. So just accept it. Don't be so rigid in our leadership style that we can't accept that. You know, it's unfortunate that the dog barks, and sometimes they'll just have to put themselves on mute while they take care of the dog. But if they're in the middle of a sentence, you know, we all kind of, okay, settle the dog down, you know.
My dog doesn't ever bark until like I'm on the
Yeah.
phone
course,
for
right.
something like really important, and then
yeah, no one ever rings the doorbell until you get on the Zoom call.
Right. So, well, does anybody in the audience have any questions that we didn't cover? Yes, ma'am.
I have a few, but I'm going to try to limit it. And I think my most pressing one is for our company, Aston Carter, like culture was big. We were in person. There were a lot of benefits when it came to training. So when we shifted to remote and we had people starting 100% remote, it was really hard to maintain that sense of culture. Now we've gone back to hybrid.
Yeah.
So we've been able to like kind of get that back. But for you all who are 100% remote, how are you all maintaining a sense of culture, especially since that is an employee value prop to attract, you know, to attract and retain top talent?
So Wellstar does a good job in really thinking about employee benefits and culture in our communications, and we're always looking to add new kind of flavors to the stew, if you will. But you're right, culture is key. How do you continue to make them feel bonded to the organization? That's a lot of it. Culture of open, clear communication, you know, a safe working environment, you know, an equal opportunity for all employees. I think you have to you know, constantly keep those virtues involved in all your thought processes and conversations with your employees. You know, everybody says, "Oh, we've got great culture." prove it.
Prove it.
Prove it. So, and I've been at Wellstar 9 months. It's the proof is there for me. So.
We're not 100% remote, and that's specifically why. My CEO is like, we have a very unique culture. It's actually what drew me to Mercy. And so it was one of those things that I agreed with him that I don't believe that we can be 100% remote. I think you lose too much, especially the more you think about the Great Resignation and how people are moving around and things like that. You have to have that personal connection. Someday, do I want to be there? Yes, but that may mean that I'm flying all over to meet my employees. Maybe they're not coming to me. Maybe I'm going to them. I don't know how we do that, but right now, that's specifically why we're hybrid.
Yeah, and I think it begins from day one, right, with the employee onboarding. Our human resources still does that overview with the employees. And I think just driving home, we have a great statement, to make a positive difference in every life we touch at Piedmont, and so we begin with that. And so I think as leaders, particularly with the revenue cycle, we have to lead with that when we meet with our staff, right? That has to be in our huddles, that has to be in our presentations, that has to be in our updates, that needs to be in our signature line, right? And so just putting those words in front of everybody and then demonstrating what that lives out to look like, I think is important in doing that. And so I think I completely agree with the relational, the in-person. That's been a loss, actually, right? But at the same time, all that I have now is the voice. All that I have is the video. And so I think just learning how to be conversational in doing that. And one of the things that helped me personally, I think, to be able to do this is I actually mentor for an organization for women business leaders in Metro Atlanta. And I mentored 3 women over webinar during COVID. And so learning how to read their emotions and still help them from those aspects, that was pivotal to kind of teach me how to be able to do that. So, I think that's part of how you drive culture too, is being aware and active like that.
That's awesome. And
That's great.
I totally agree. I think that as leaders in healthcare, that's what we all need to be doing, is looking for ways to enhance our employees, quality of life, their work-life balance, all those things. Right? That's the proof of culture.
Well, I hate to do this because I know there's a lot more questions and we could probably talk to this panel all day, but we are out of time and I am in charge of keeping us on schedule. So I appreciate you guys so much insight, so many great conversations. I think we're going to be talking about this one for a long time. I actually see a podcast in the future on some of these specific issues.
Right?
Y'all, if you guys all go out and subscribe to the podcast, I promise I'll stop mentioning it every 10 minutes. So that's what you got to do, though. I'm going to check the subscriptions, and when we get to 200, I'll stop talking about it all the time. But thank you so much for your time today. We very much appreciate it. Thank you to Vispa for sponsoring this panel.